You're going to get found out. That thought does not always arrive in words. Sometimes it is quicker than that. More subtle. Harder to catch. Maybe it shows up as a hesitation. Or that brief pause right before you speak. Maybe it is the way you reread something twice that you already understood the first time. Maybe it is the way you hold back your idea until someone else says something similar first. And it happens so quickly. You almost do not question it. But underneath all of that, there is a quieter thought running. They're going to realize, I don't actually belong here. And the confusing part is, nothing around you really confirms that. You were chosen for this. You earned your place. You are doing the work. From the outside, it looks like you are doing well. But internally, it does not always feel that way. And more people experience this than you think. Especially when they are growing. There is someone, let's call her Zara. She is walking into a meeting. And even before she sits down, she is already reading the room. Who is there? How confident they seem. How easily they speak. Who sounds certain? Who sounds like they belong without effort? She tells herself to relax. You know this. And she does. That is what makes it so frustrating. Because the doubt does not come from knowing nothing. It comes from not trusting what you know when it matters. The conversation starts. Ideas are moving quickly. People are speaking with certainty. And then she has a point. A good one. Something useful. Something that would actually add value. She leans forward slightly, ready to say it. And then you might recognize this moment. That small internal pull. What if this is obvious? What if they already know this? What if I say it badly? What if I sound like I don't belong here? So she pauses. Just for a moment. And then she lets it pass. A few minutes later, someone else says almost the same thing. And it lands. People nod. They build on it. The room moves forward. And you can almost feel that moment. When it sinks in. I knew that. I was thinking that. I should have said it. And maybe later. When everything is quieter. Her mind comes back to it. I should have spoken. That was obvious. Why did I hold back again? And moments like that start to build. Not in one big dramatic collapse. In smaller moments. Enough to create a pattern. You hold back a little more. You question yourself a little faster. You wait until you feel completely certain. You let other people go first. You keep checking whether you sound smart enough. Whether your contribution is good enough. Whether you have earned the right to take up space. And over time, it starts to feel like you are slightly behind. Like you are catching up. Like everyone else understands the room more naturally than you do. Like you are not quite at the level you are in. But what is actually happening is something else. You do not feel like a fraud. Because you lack ability. You feel like a fraud. Because your standards changed faster than your self-perception. You stepped into a bigger room. A newer level. A different environment. And instead of measuring yourself against where you came from, you started measuring yourself against people who have been there longer. People who may be more practiced, more settled, more familiar with the room. So of course it feels uncomfortable. That gap you feel, that uncertainty, that sense of, I am not fully ready yet. That is not evidence that you do not belong. It is what growth feels like. Because expansion rarely arrives as confidence. It usually arrives as doubt. Not because you are incapable, but because you are stretching beyond the level where your confidence used to feel automatic. That is a very different thing. And if you do not understand that, you start misreading the whole experience. You think discomfort means you are unqualified. You think hesitation means you do not belong. You think the gap between where you are and where you want to be means you have somehow slipped through by mistake. But that gap is not fraudulence. It is development. It is the distance between entering a new space and feeling fully at home in it. And those are not the same moment. So instead of asking yourself, do I belong here? You might ask something more honest. What am I learning here that I did not know before? What am I still adjusting to? What part of this feels new rather than wrong? That changes your position completely. Now you are not trying to prove yourself. You are allowing yourself to grow into the space. You are not demanding instant certainty. You are recognizing that unfamiliarity is part of expansion. You are not a fraud. You are just in a space where your old level of confidence no longer applies. And that is exactly where you are supposed to be. Because if you only ever feel confident, it probably means you are only ever standing where you have already mastered. Growth does not feel like mastery at first. It feels like stretching, learning, being slightly unsure while still moving forward. That is not fraudulence. That is expansion. And the more clearly you see that, the less power that old fear has. The fear of being found out. The fear of not being enough. The fear that someone will realize you are still becoming. Of course you are still becoming. That is not a flaw. That is the whole point. So the next time that feeling rises, when you are about to speak, or contribute, or step forward, notice it, not to obey it, just to see it. And remember, you are not being exposed. You are being stretched. And those are very different things.